We are live.
We are live. This is Senate Finance, March 15th, the Ides of March. I have an Ides of March sweater. I should have worn it. I want to
What's an Ides of March sweater?
I won the Vermont State Sluggy Design.
Oh,
With that.
you're right.
It's maple trees with saps and.
These
Daggers or?
No daggers, just saps.
Folks.
No, just
Yeah,
saps.
you got that in here.
Yeah, so anyway, we're starting today with two H bills. We have two charter changes to come to us, I believe, because they include a local options tax. And their H's, we have not had that many bills. Once we get 181 out of here. Well, the bill we did this morning was an H bill. We'll start on the H bills that we have. We've got the flood preparedness bill today. And that has some funds in it. So we will look at that on Monday or Tuesday, first day next week. So we're gonna start with H 801, which is an act relating to the approval of the adoption of the charter of the town of Waterbury. And we have Tom Weeks with us.
Yes,
Welcome.
thank you.
And the protocol here is just introduce yourself for the record. Do we have copies of these?
Of the town charter?
Yeah,
Oh, no.
okay. Just what's in the record, I assume it's here because you have a local option tax of some kind. That's usually when we get charters. So welcome to Senate Finance and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Tom Lights, Municipal Manager for Waterbury. I'm happy to give, if it would please the committee, a brief overview of our thought process in developing the charter and what it would mean for us to have this adopted.
Okay.
I became the official manager here, January of 2023. I replaced Bill Sheplik, who's been here for a long time. Really from the beginning of my tenure, we had charter conversations and they ramped up shortly after town meeting day of 2023. And we spent much of the year working on the charter. Ultimately, the decision was made by the board to have a pretty bare bones charter to just solve the immediate problems in front of us. We're aware that some town charters and city charters are very extensive. But the immediate challenges in front of us really pertain to financing, and that's where the local option tax came in. We probably had 6 months of conversation about this. There was a brief pause in the summer because of the flood, but I think the flood gave even more impetus to consider a local option tax, given we had some financial impact from the flood and we have a lot of capital projects in front of us that we'd like to do. Ultimately, there was a charter vote in December. It was a special election, so turnout indeed was fairly low, but there were two main questions. The first about the local option tax passed with about 68% support. And the second question, which really pertained to the manager's authority, passed with about 80% support. So I like to joke that I'm more popular than a tax.
Yeah, you would want to be at least there.
And we estimate the local option tax is going to be in the range of $700,000 a year if passed, which is about 15% of our property tax levy. So pretty meaningful revenue stream to us. That's a conservative estimate, I think.
This is meals and alcohol.
It is everything.
It is everything.
We did not parse it. It is sales, rooms, meals, alcohol.
Okay, but you haven't voted to enact any of those. This is just gives you permission.
Correct. Correct. The second part of the charter really pertained to the manager's authority, and what drove that in large part was historically we've had some turnover in our planning and zoning positions, and those positions have to be recommended by the planning commission and appointed by the select board. However, the manager has full authority over that employee once hired, and that includes the ability to terminate. And so the board felt like this was an odd position for everyone, and the planning commission had no desire to be involved in the hiring process of staff. And in fact, they're the only town board that has any involvement in that hiring process, aside from the select board, which hires me.
You have a strong manager form of government.
And so giving that authority to the manager, we felt streamlined the entire process, made it easier for everyone, and also made it better for the employee who doesn't have to necessarily get reappointed by a board periodically where they don't necessarily report to that board. And then there were some additional issues that we decided to add to the charter that we thought made fundamental sense. The first one gives me the authority to direct department heads to have some hiring authority, which in essence is practice, and it would be consistent with our handbook, but we felt embedding that in the charter was important. The other piece was the charter gives the select board the authority to approve department head positions. So the manager would, in essence, make a recommendation. The select board would have the ability to approve. And the select board and I thought that was important, given how department heads are so important to town government here. We deliberately did not specify the form of approval. We understand that would require a vote of the select board. Could be an agenda item, could be a consent agenda item. So the charter was written to not necessarily involve in the hiring process, to give them that final approval authority. So that in broad strokes was our thought process. Again, tried to keep the charter relatively short to try to accomplish our goals and solve the problems in front of us without having a 20-page charter in front of you, akin to a developed city like Montpelier.
Our jurisdiction is your local option tax. I can see where meals and alcohol tax in downtown Waterbury might do very well.
We hope so.
It sounds like it will. Committee discussion.
I support this. I'm curious if we've ever been kind of new to this committee. Have we ever turned down a local option tax approved by a community?
No, not in my memory. Well, we never.
One that wasn't, it hadn't been.
Well, it is coming back today. That is next. There's been reformation.
We have approval.
Yeah, we may have approved one, we shouldn't. But, and that just had to do with having a charter. But we have in fact voted several times to just do away with the approval and let anybody that wants to, any town. So are we ready for a motion?
So moved.
All right, Senator Brock has moved that we approve H 801 and act relating to the approval of the adoption of the charter of the town of Waterbury. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. I see that as 601. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Hopefully get that through the. I guess it's come from the House, so
Go on, sorry, you get it?
GovOps has already had it. They asked if we were gonna take them up, and I said, well, there were 8, should we take them up if there was any urgency? They thought yes. So they were taking them up. And the next is the town of South Hero. I did.
That's correct. And me?
Have they watched the? Ours is more comfortable than many in the
Nice to see
building.
you.
Was.
Good, good. Thank you for having me. My name is David Clinton Carter. I'm the select board chair in South Hero. And you are my 4th committee. So,
Well, yeah, you probably have to do GovOps, and then if you've got the local option, it's gotta go to the money committee, so it Ways and Means and now us.
yes, yes. Well, I want to thank you for having me here and the opportunity to be here. You know, I was just thinking, looking at the Zoom, you realize it was 4 years ago this week, I think I saw my first Zoom, and I think that's when Zooms came into it. Now it's so ubiquitous with everything we do. How do we live without it?
4 weeks ago this week, years is when the Senate got sent home and shut down with COVID, and within 10 days, we were up and running in Zoom.
Friday the 13th.
Friday the
Friday the
13th.
13th.
It's actually,
Stock in Zoom and Purell.
Yeah,
exactly.
For about 2 weeks, we tried to run the state on conference calls.
Yeah.
yes.
Awful, because we were talking over each other.
So we seem to forget it, but it's important to remember that period. Anyway, the town of South Hero began with voting for a local option tax 2 years ago at our town meeting.
Yes.
We began by looking at the statute and said, all we have to do is vote and we could have a local option tax. So that's what we did. And the vote 2 years ago was 389 yes and 209 no for a local option tax strictly on meals and alcohol. We specifically did not do one on sales because we have just mom and pop stores, and the sales would have impacted the local people, our residents. Our target really are tourists. And we have 10 venues in South Hero that serve food. 3 of them are seasonal, but 7 are year-round venues in South Hero alone. We have seven venues that sell alcohol. One of them is seasonal, the other year-round. So we have more tourist opportunities in South Hero than any other town in the county. And we're trying to generate some revenue to help pay for some of our infrastructure. We're doing a new park, which we're going to be establishing, and upgrade of our 1816 old white meeting house. So then we discovered after later in the session that we did not qualify to have a local option tax by vote because in 1997, the Act 60, our equalized tax rate was $1.12 per 100 instead of $1.10 per 100. So we were
When this all went in.
So we were disqualified. So then we had to go back, and I'm a retired lawyer, which is dangerous. And I went to Title 24 and wrote up a charter using some of the other charters that other towns had, and had it run by our attorney, then the Secretary of State's office, then the Attorney General's office, and then the Legislative Council. And here we are with our charter, asking that it be
So
approved.
this is your whole chart.
Correct. This is a new charter for us, so. So the charter that went for a vote last August 1st was approved by votes of 380 yes to 220 no. And so we've had very strong support. The charter does allow us to enact with a further vote on rooms, but we don't have any hotels or motels. We do have Airbnbs and that kind of thing, but we've declined to do that at this time, but it has that option to do that. It also gives us opportunity to appoint certain positions. We do now have in the last year a town administrator, not a manager, an administrator that's hired by the select board. We also fill the slots of delinquent tax collector and listers, because sometimes it's hard to find people to run for those offices.
Yes.
So that's incorporated in our draft charter, so,
And your local option tax,
and the local option taxes and that.
which is our jurisdiction.
Yes, so that's why we're asking for is the approval on that, and I really appreciate the support that I've gotten from our legislator, Mike Morgan. And we've had support with Dick Mazza, our Carson thoughts are with him. And he was very supportive in the past for us. So we really have appreciated the hard work he's put in. He's been a friend of mine for 40 years since he first ran for the Senate.
He's a friend of a lot of people.
Yes, I know. Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I'm trying to remember what we did, but it was something. this committee got to the end of the line and somebody realized you didn't have, there was some poor thing that went on just to repeal it so you could get the charter. Okay, Senator Good.
Thank you for coming in. Can you, repeat the town vote, please?
The town votes, for the local option tax was 389 yes, to 209 no. And on the charter was 380 yes, to 220 no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late. I and others have introduced intermittently legislation that would allow any community to implement a local option tax after a vote without having to bring their charter to the legislature to make that change. Would that help you in any way? Do you feel like things were delayed or people who are volunteers had to spend time they didn't have to get it through the legislative process when you wouldn't have to otherwise if we passed that legislation?
Absolutely, it would have been nice to just go through the statutory process. And because when I read the statute for local option tax, there's no mention in it about the rule from, I guess, it's Act 60 in 1997, having to have an equalized tax rate. And when we first talked to him, actually in the tax department, the first attorney said, oh, yeah, we're sending you the paperwork. It was the deputy commissioner who said, you didn't have an equalized tax rate because our education tax rate in 1997 was $1.06 per hundred. The equalized tax rate was $1.12 per pound. So it's very complicated.
We've been trying to straighten, this committee has voted that out at least 3 times. I'm not.
I guess there is a bill S-88 that is addressing that issue.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going through again. But this time, and for the charter, well, I can look for water, Terry. We'll put that down as I'm the reporter. Senator Bray.
Well, just by way of, I don't know if it's reassuring history or not reassuring. When I was in GovOps, we put through a bill that allowed towns to do quite a bit more than just local option tax. There was like a group of like 10 different things that are sort of fundamental. And the Senate approved, but it went to the House and it was, never heard from again. So,
Yes,
not sure why, that's the way it went.
and I had a motion.
We move to approve the, H554.
Yeah.
An act relating to approval of adoption of parts of common subsidy.
Okay. Been moved. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. One say no, that carries 700. Senator Brock, would you like to report that? Is that your district or not?
It is not, I think reported.
Okay,
But we're Senator Mouse's district.
yeah, that's right.
I only have Albert.
Yeah, that's,
And,
I just drive through all of them in Swan, and it is a much prettier drive.
Look off the water.
And the new bridge. I was
Yes.
very happy to see the new bridge. My son-in-law was the environmental engineer who sat up there for months watching.
It's very nice to have it put in. It took a while, but it's great.
Okay,
I want to thank you all very much. I appreciate the hard work you all folks are putting in, and I know there's a lot more work ahead. Especially in Brighton.
so thank you for coming all that way.
No problem. Love to drive.
Okay, it is a short drive. Okay, committee, we are under a time crunch today in that Kirby has a hard stop at 3. And so we're gonna have to move through the rest of them. This is 150. I don't know what it is. It's an automobile insurance bill. I didn't find out until yesterday that judiciary, through some negotiation, has authority over automobile insurance. But Senator Sears, because some of the lobbyists in the building felt that this could have a major impact on insurance costs. So Senator Sears has allowed us, we passed over today to take a look at it. And then we have 181 on for fine, so at 2:30, we're gonna need to kind of move through that. Yeah, but 181 is the one we have to get out.
Right.
And we have Maria, is Maria able to come? We're 5 minutes early.
Madam Chair, are we gonna move the battery bill up to 54?
It is on for discussion and possible vote.
Okay,
But it doesn't need, I mean, we would move it, but it doesn't need to move today.
No, we have next week to move it.
Not that I.
Yeah.
Keep it, but.
We've seen it.
Enjoyed our discussion on batteries. Well, sure.
I'll move it.
Do we have a,
bringing my used batteries to actually collection in that new shed we built.
yeah. I mean, what happens to car batteries, or have we not, at some point, there's gonna be a whole lot of electric car batteries.
So
They're
there's a
gonna need
study
these-
in it because we know that coming.
Okay.
Busy currently.
But the threshold for batteries in this one, I think is 20 kilos, 44 pounds. Okay, so, and those weigh, I'm not sure, 5, 6, 7, 800 pounds or something.
Use ignition sources for other power plants.
Well, actually, so since we're talking about car batteries, people worry, oh, we don't want to make very expensive junk, right? So the demands on a car battery are far higher than on like a battery that sits in your cellar to go right out of a power outage or glitch. So one of the ways of repurposing them is they're taking a battery that's not, just like your phone doesn't fully charge. Well, so that when your car, you do want maximum mileage, so eventually you'll replace the battery, but for your house, it's less important that you have a 0% charge in that battery. So they can have a whole second lifespan as an in the cellar power wall, like a Tesla power wall.
I think
There's a business opportunity there. Yeah.
okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Did S18 change materially? In the house, the tobacco?
I have no what that.
Okay.
There were some amendments that passed.
Do you think they affected?
One extended the deadline or the implementation a year out, so it will affect this year's revenues. But there were 53 days.
Yeah.
That's like it.
Well, we've got all the advocates, one advocate here. Was waiting for Rita. And like most less council these days, she was probably tired,
Yeah.
and then our second. But that's the. And walked through the door. But I wanted to see the bill first, and then we'll hear what concerns are on both sides. And then decide. Or we could bring a proposal for an amendment to the floor. Do you really know anything else passed in the House last night?
Well, Damien was there on something after S18. Now I can't remember what else.
There, they thought they'd be there at 7. So I might need that canceled. But they were there at least 9:15.
Yeah.
But they got a dinner break and they got the cafeteria to stay open late to feed them. We have never gotten that.
Maybe it's because there's fewer restaurants. Lately.
There are fewer restaurants and
But that isn't it.
there are more households.
Yeah.
The Senate tradition does not get a dinner break.
I know, I remember Tom.
I have a box of Valentine candy that Senator Mazza gave last year. It's still in my desk, but my thought is there will come a time when that will be the only nourishment. I probably should start subscribing. Bananas or something in there.
Why? Or-
Maria should walk through the door any minute. She's
Yeah.
scheduled for 1:30. But I don't want us to go off for 1 minute. Okay, next week, I'm just going to put on all the S-bills that have to got out. Right now, we have the flood preparedness bills came over from GovOps. I'm meeting with the chair on Monday. I don't think it was to raise a lot of money. I have no idea how to do that. We'll find out. I heard from Representative lobbyist of Rygate that they were working on a proposal and they're working through Representative.
The gentleman who was here
Yes,
yesterday.
Bobby, whose last name, it's, the last part is video, but the first is player,
Denise.
the least, no,
Farless.
it's police.
Farless,
This Farless.
farless review.
Yeah, there's an R in it. I would say
FAR.
police. It's Farless. Anyway, they are
Good
working
thing
on.
Spelling.
So we're gonna sit on miscellaneous ag, I think, until we know.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any other bills.
Probably. Well,
I
you should just ask.
wasn't
where it comes
fully following yours.
S bills we have to get out next week. We don't have.
301, 254, 184,
What's 301?
just is one, agricultural subjects.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've got ag. We've got the batteries. We've got the flood bill. But unless somebody dumped a whole lot of it on us this morning, we've got a pretty light menu, so we will start through our H bills.
Can I
Yeah,
say something, well, that I don't want to be off the record? I think we've had some leaders in flood impacted communities reach back out and, ask to do some more creative thinking about how we
okay.
find, additional ways to reduce costs and build in incentives. I have talked to some of those folks, namely Tom Lozon, a member of the Ferry City Council, that, we need partnership to ensure we're not putting additional pressures on the education fund. We're not
there giving us
finding additional. If I did that yesterday, almost on the floor, so I can't.
Something outside, I don't know. if it-
No, I know it started playing my photos, like music, and I was like,
Hey, I flipped mine back and got emails from 2020. I just hit a mail. In fact,
Mine interrupted me this morning. Everyone presumed because I'm an old man that it was my fault.
well, to finish my song for I do think there are partners from all political corners willing to come to the table to talk about net revenue
Yeah.
and figuring out how to not create an ongoing vicious cycle in flood impacted communities that will last a generation.
okay, I don't,
Can I see if Tom wants to testify next week?
John will be welcome to testify. We're not gonna have a huge amount of time next week. We might get a day or two, depending what comes. But we can definitely look at it. This, I'm not sure, this bill is about setting up regionals, programs and centers but we definitely can alter it. We haven't messed with the GovOps bill this year.
Oh, you mean the flood bill?
Yeah.
Right.
Or do you
Yeah.
want to do a separate?
Oh, no, actually, I wasn't even thinking that strategically. That is a great idea, I think.
But we won't have that much time next week.
Right.
To redo a whole
Yes.
thing. But definitely,
But it's timely.
it would also be helpful to have a summer study committee with no money.
Right.
All volunteer, to work on it.
Yes.
That.
Yeah,
Program.
right. That's a good,
Maria is late.
did any, Oh, I'm thinking Frank Bryan too, thank God.
Right, Brian?
Well, so I saw Frank O'Brien up there and I was like, oh my God, he was both of our Frank Bryan. So I looked up there and I thought.
He's the brother, a very good friend of mine, David. Brian.
We're waiting, S-150.
We are waiting S-150 Maria, who's the draft.
Okay, I was just,
That's-
is he with paperwork?
Yeah, we are waiting for the drafter. That does not have to come out here today. I'm getting a little nervous about the meeting. Because we have a half hour to get that out. I think what's going on is we have a draft coming to us that includes the changes we made yesterday. We have a lobbyist who, a lot of other things done. One, it is removing that whole section about what can be put on the bill. There's a difference of opinion whether or not there's a. Anyway, we're gonna get the bills that we had yesterday. And we can hear the other two suggestions which Senator Chitman had. But that bill needs to go today or it's dead. So that's it, Maria. I say we are on a time crunch, so
Okay.
I just lose my other drafter for my must do today bill at 3:00. So,
Oh, you need backup?
no, this is, yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
This is a much
I know.
played with, manipulated bill, and it just, it's time to move. It's time to make a decision.
Okay. So, right now, Maria Royal with the Legislative Council, and we're gonna be talking about S-150, which is on your webpage under my name, or you might have hard copy.
Senator McDonald, can you take over for 2 minutes? I left all my stuff from this morning in my other committee room, which is where my iPad is.
Oh.
So you continue, I will go get my iPad.
Okay,
I can
okay.
follow.
So, S-150 was in the Senate Committee on Judiciary, and I'm gonna walk through their report of the bill, their amendments. So the subject is uninsured, underinsured auto insurance. As you all know, in Vermont, you're required to have liability insurance, and you're also required to have uninsured, underinsured coverage, in the event the other vehicle that you're involved in a crash with perhaps is not insured or is underinsured, right? So the first section of the bill, in subsection F on line 10 of the bill, pertains to when a motor vehicle is underinsured, what that means in Vermont. And there are proposed changes to those definitions. So, and I'll just read through the language first, and then we can talk about what the purpose or what is, what the new proposal is. So for purpose of this subchapter, a motor vehicle is underinsured to the extent that 1, the liability insurance limits applicable at the time of the crash are less than. The proposal is to say the damages that a person insured pursuant to this section is legally entitled to recover because of injury or death. And and again, we'll come back and have a discussion, but then, or number 2, the available liability insurance has been reduced by payments to others injured in the crash to an amount less than the damages that a person insured pursuant to this section is legally entitled to recover because of injury or death. And then one more subsection I will just read, and then we'll talk about the changes more holistically. So on page 2, subsection H, payments made to an insured party under the liability insurance policy of a person legally responsible for the damage or personal injury shall not be deducted from the underinsured motorist coverage otherwise available to the injured party. So that last section was the impetus for the proposal here. And basically what that is saying is if you're in an accident and your damage is $200,000, $500,000, and you're able to recover from the at-fault driver $50,000 to $100,000, whatever. You then have your underinsurance policy available. And under that limits of that policy, the amount that you recover from the at-fault driver cannot be deducted from what is then available to you under your underinsurance coverage, right? That's the proposal, and that's what is represented here. One thing that I do want to say, with respect to the statute itself is not the easiest to understand. I don't think it's been amended for a very long time. The language is a little bit confusing to me. So when you look at the the definitions for when underinsurance is triggered, this is how I read this, but I understand there may be some confusion, so you're going to hear from others, and you'll decide whether it should be clarified and what you want to say. So for purposes of an underinsured motor vehicle, the liability insurance limits applicable at the time of the crash. I read that to be the liability insurance that's applicable is the at-fault driver, right? Because that's why they have liability, right? It's not your own liability, you weren't at fault. So if those are less than your damages, so what your medical damages or whatever, then any amount above that would be part of the underinsurance coverage. I think and you'll hear more about this, the concern is that, that being one interpretation is that might be construed to cover more than just what your underinsurance policy limits are. You know, 100,000, whatever. So that's just something to flag. And
So
What's the problem? I'm sure that it seeks to resolve.
so that goes back to the separate subsection that I read on page 2, subsection H. My understanding, part of the testimony that was presented to judiciary is you're in an accident and the at-fault driver has a liability policy, and from that policy, they pay your damages, your injuries, but there's a limit to the amount of coverage that they have, right? So then you go to your own underinsurance coverage. My understanding what's happening now is the amount that you recovered from the at-fault driver is deducted from what's available under your underinsurance coverage. So the proposal here is to prevent that from happening.
Okay. Even though your insurance hasn't paid out the $2,000,
Right.
you've got $3,000 worth of underinsurance coverage. They deduct that too, and then you only have one, and you're not made whole.
And your damages may exceed that. So that's
Okay.
my understanding of what's happening now, and this is intended to
So-
address that.
Okay, yeah. Get certified and et cetera.
So to stick with numbers, if the damage was 5,000 and you recovered 5 from the underinsured motorist, who would that fall into?
Damage was 5 and you recovered 5?
Yeah, so then in that
Then you're
case,
not.
you
then you're
don't
not
turn
underinsured.
to your
Yeah,
underinsured.
correct.
So if damage is 5, their coverage is 3, now you're basically short 2.
Right.
If your own policy, so when you go back to your underlying policy, your coverage against underinsured drivers. And your coverage was 5. Are we saying you'll get 5 plus the 3 you did collect, or 5 minus the 3, you're short 2, your insurer will make up the 2?
Unless you have less underinsured insurance. If you only have 5, the damage is 7. Then if they deduct the 5 from yours, then you're out the 2. Whereas if they can't deduct it, your insurance will pay the extra 2.
Right, and it's based on your damages.
Sure.
It's not based on, just the number in your policy, so they,
I'm glad the judiciary committee got this before we did.
Well, we aren't even supposed to have it, so
And their
some special law.
recommendation was 5-0.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad they got it first.
Under,
So what, sorry,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
5 and 3 steps, so the second thing, you went back, you were short because you had 3 of your $5,000 damage from the underinsured motorist who's at fault.
so from their liability, that's
From
3.
3, and you had $5,000 in damage, so you were short 2. Now you turn to your own insurance to backfill the 2.
Well, they would be able to, they would have 2, yeah.
unless your insurance, that if, and I gather that's what they do now, or some do, is subtract that 5 from your uninsurance. If you've only got 5 in your insurance policy, and you got 5 from the other guys, they subtract that, then you're out the 2, because your insurance doesn't have the money to pay for 2 of them. It's whether or not they subtract what you got paid from the other driver, from your policy limit for uninsured. Okay, I think we're gonna see what both sides have to say. Maybe we'll understand it better, maybe we won't. I am going to go with this. We've had people added on, so there's no, it's first come, first served, there's no preference.
Can I just say one more, because there is one other provision in
Okay.
and very quickly, in section 2 of the bill, this concerns medical payments coverage, Medicaid coverage, which is optional auto coverage that you can purchase in Vermont, usually for very small amounts. My understanding is like less than $5,000. And that's coverage that's available to you, if you're in an accident immediately, regardless of fault. And can be used to cover things like insurance, health insurance, deductibles, co-pays, that kind of thing. So what proposed here on page 2, line 12. The right of subrogation against any third party shall not exist or be claimed in favor of the insurer who has paid or reimbursed to or for the benefit of the insured medical costs payable pursuant to medical payments coverage, Medicaid coverage. So they would provide the coverage to whoever bought the policy, but they could not seek reimbursement from a third party. And you'll hear more about both sides of that issue.
Okay. I think that,
But they shall not seek a reimbursement, that's the Medicaid insurance provider.
They
Yeah. They
Okay,
don't go
your
after
insurance. pay,
the,
correct,
the private insurance.
okay? Yes.
Makes sense.
next I have Jamie Field.
Oh, can I ask a
Yes,
question?
that's where you.
So this might not just be a question for me, but I want to start with you because maybe this conversation came up in judiciary. I just got my insurance card last night, a new one, and for the first time on the back of it, it says, if you are in an accident, and then the number one thing you do is do not admit fault. And I'm wondering if the committee has, if this is progressive and it is on the back of my insurance card. And I'm wondering if there's some litigation or some trend towards a drawn out period of time where no one is admitting fault. I could not believe that's on the back of my insurance card now. So I'm just concerned, I'm concerned about car insurance, like I'm concerned about all kinds of other insurance that they're just, there's not a lot of consumer protection built in anymore of fairness, and I don't know who would be responsible for that. And when the insurance companies sit in the witness terminals, so it didn't come out in judiciary.
Not that I'm aware of, I didn't hear all.
Judiciary, but,
Yeah.
it's already over automobile insurance. Some judiciary, but it's often a lot of issues. Insurance. Consumer protection.
Maybe we should, maybe I should change my insurance, because I don't like the idea that Progressive is saying to me,
This is cooperative out of Millbury.
well,
They don't say-
I've never gotten one of my insurance cards.
they do not say that. That was so sad. I have it in the other committee room, if we
It
take a
does
break.
say do not.
We're gonna move
Oh.
on. We have limited time here and
At least it doesn't say deny it regardless of circumstances.
remember First Amendment rights and telling companies what they can and cannot put on their product.
I stopped you.
Okay,
I-
James.
Exactly, yeah.
Welcome. I don't know what you think here.
I think this might be the first time. It's good to have you all. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, James Smith with Colonel Piper, Davidson Kramer. This afternoon, on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, APCA is a national trade association of property casualty companies numbering about 1,000 or so nationwide, several hundred of whom are licensed here in Vermont, and in the aggregate, we're at about 70% of the market of P&C lines in Vermont. Joining me is Frank O'Brien as well, not Frank Bryan,
I know.
different individual. Frank is with APCIA. It's okay with the committee. I'll start with it.
Okay, I
A
was
little
gonna say,
bit,
you can
and
come
then-
up or,
Yeah, and you can follow a little bit later and bring, some additional comments. But thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. And, this is a complicated and arcane section of law that is very, as Maria mentioned, very difficult at times to parse through. But there are three specific issues I'll speak about. One is the definition of uninsured motorist coverage, one. The second is the ability or not for an insurer to offset or deduct payments from the at-fault driver against the insured's policy. And the third is this, medical payment subrogation provision. But first, let me give a little bit of background on underinsurance motorist coverage, just if you could bear with me. It was developed decades ago and designed as an alternative to compulsory liability insurance so that a financially responsible person could protect themselves against injuries caused from an underinsured or underinsured driving. If the negligent driver's liability insurance limits are too low, to adequately cover your damage, you then turn to your own policy to fill the balance, subject to the limits of the policy. And you heard the examples, I'll use it, if you've got 500,000 in UM/UIM coverage, you're entitled to the 500,000 of UM/UIM coverage. It's important to note that underinsurance coverage is replacement or gap. It's intended to fill that hole and not be treated as excess coverage. This is important because, again, it sort of places the responsibility first on the at-fault driver, and before you go to your own policy to then pay for those things. So there's accountability for causing an accident and doesn't require the injured person to look to their own policy. Today, when the relevant liability amount is, today when insurers calculate their premium for this part of the overall policy, they take into consideration that it is gap and replacement coverage. And so they price up to the available limits and not beyond. So when we have our policies, they're currently under this current policy and policy in Vermont. This is consistent with other states in terms of doing this. It's to prevent double payment or double recovery for the same damage or award. And it also helps to keep overall costs down. This premise in insurance speak is called difference in limits. So you can offset the difference from that fault part it is to your own policy. Section 1, if you were looking at the bill, this provision is what we referred to on page 2 under sub H, which basically says we're going to switch from Vermont's difference in limits to an excess of limits approach, meaning you can now not deduct or offset from the coverage, the payments you receive from the at-fault driver, but you will stack or combine what you have in your policy plus what you receive from the at-fault policy. So if I'm the driver with, well, let me do this, if I'm the insured with 200,000 in UM/UIM coverage, an at-fault driver hits me with $100,000 of coverage, I'm $100,000 short, so I look to my own policy to get to the $200,000. This would not allow that to happen. This would say 100,000 plus 200,000.
I'm losing track. If I have insurance for up 10,000, whatever. I have damage of 18,000. The at-fault driver has a policy that covers 10. You're saying that I'm only entitled to my 10 and that I have to swallow the 8? Because if you subtract the 10 from my policy, I'm left with $8,000 uncovered.
Right, your policy limits as the party that is hit, you're entitled to that full amount. But currently, that full amount is a combination of whatever you receive from the at-fault party with the replacement or gap under your existing policy.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
So
Go ahead.
Are you,
I'm following what you're saying and I understand it, but my question is, let's say you cap out the person that hit you, the at fault, and then it hits you for whatever the remainder is. Does that still negatively affect your premium as a claim against your insurance that your rates would then go up?
Potentially.
That weakens the argument for not allowing the stacking to be. Because if it's gonna hit and affect me negatively, I'm already
You
paying
hope
for
you
that
never have,
coverage.
you hope you never have to call on your own in policy. We hope, everybody's insured. And perhaps Frank might be able to speak to this a little bit more in detail a little bit later on. But let me speak to what the impact is potentially under this proposal. So I mentioned, this difference in limits is the majority of the states, excess of limits is not. If you're allowed to stack policy, that's an exposure that's not currently considered by insurance companies in
You're
pricing
talking
the policy.
stack. So I'm stacking my insurance policy on top of
Yeah.
the other guy's insurance policy. He's got $10,000 worth of coverage. I've got $10,000 worth of coverage. But I'm only entitled to the amount of my 10,000 insurance policy. So even if the damage is 18, he pays 10, I'm not allowed to collect 8. That's how you figure it, that extra 8 can't go on there.
because that's your liability coverage for hitting someone else versus your coverage as an injured person, like, are you saying that, is this a scenario in which you don't have coverage as an injured person?
No, you have coverage. You look to your own policy. I mean, that's what.
That's uninsured.
Right, but I'm limited to the amount I pay for in my policy. If the other guy's policy is liable for 10, but the cost is 8, I'm not. What you're saying is I shouldn't be allowed to collect that right now. I can't collect that extra 8 for my insurance policy, and that's the actuarial
Right.
numbers that you're using now. So that if we change this, the enhanced risk of your having to pick up that 8 will be figured into the rates.
Exactly. It's an additional exposure because it potentially goes through above what is currently your limits on your policy. It's, we
My
can't say.
limit on my
with certain-
policy is 10 from my policy. I'm getting 10 from somebody else's policy. So why is that impacting somebody else's policies? I mean, would it happen if my father gave me $10,000 to cover the damage and I hit you for 8?
Under your example, it's a wash. There is no drawing on your UIM policy because you receive the amount of
In cash.
damages from.
But if another insurance company gives me the cash, then I can't get anything else. If they give me $10,000, their insurance, they write me a check. I am limited to the $10,000 in my policy. If they give me a $10,000 check, I can't look to my company
Right,
to make up the difference.
maybe around there's, you know,
The $10,000 check you got was because they were only 10,000 because they were underinsured.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Okay, all right, but the bottom line, whether or not we like this, present policy of insurance companies is that they figure your rates, your risk based on a $10,000 loss, which means that if somebody else is at fault, if they give me less than my insurance policy covers me for, that's all I get.
that you,
Yeah,
up to the full amount of your UIM.
okay, so it only comes in if my policy is for 10,000, the damage is 8, I get 10. That wipes out my insurance, my policy, because I've been.
They're not
compensated.
underinsured.
If they're in, and the award is 10. You've got a $2,000 difference. You
Yes.
then look to your policy to make up that $2,000 difference.
Does the deductible not apply when you're looking at your own insurance? Because
So-
if you're the injured motorist, you're not.
Yeah, no,
There's no
exactly.
deductible.
We're only talking about the UIM coverage, that's right,
Okay.
deductibles for collision coverage.
Okay, but if it's 10, the other guy gives me 8, I can get 2 from my insurance. But if the other guy gives me 10, the damage is 18, I can't get the 8,000 from my insurance.
Correct, you're limited to $10,000.
So no matter how we feel about that system, that is the way that insurance carriers presently price my auto insurance based on how much risk. And if there's risk that they're going to have to pay out under a different system, that will impact the price. Do we have any estimate about how much
I
that
can
might in
describe a
Vermont?
couple, I speak for the industry, so I can't speak to what
Any
the industry will
individual?
do as a whole, so understand, however, this does introduce new exposure. There
Okay.
new costs, so each company will have to react to what that may be. But there are a couple of examples, you may hear from the proponents, Rhode Island is one state that has this inability to offset, for example.
Okay,
for
I was gonna
excess
ask,
of
do any other states do this?
The average, I heard from one large writer in both states, their average premium in Vermont is $26.07. In Rhode Island, the same premium is $68.04, so it's 160% change.
Are you saying a month?
Yeah. I think there's-
Okay, but I moved here from Boston. I drove in Boston. I got hit 3 times standing still. Insurance is much higher in Boston because you can get hit 3 times standing in a red light. And it's much cheaper. Rhode Island is a much more urban, concentrated, probably drive like Massachusetts people. That impacts the rate. I'm not comfortable saying 20 to 60, 180% is what it's gonna impact in Vermont because our risk here, at least it used to be lower. I'm assuming it still is. Cause I just drove in Boston
Sure.
and they still drive like maniacs.
I'm trying to draw sort of examples because I'm not aware that a company has priced this yet.
Yeah, well, I guess that's,
The other example given to me was by another large auto writer. And looked at another state that went from a difference in limits to an excess of limits. And that resulted in an 80% increase in that portion of the premium.
in that portion of the premium.
Being
But
referred-
what,
Correct.
yeah, so what portion is that portion of the whole premium? I
It's,
mean, it's an 80% increase and a 3% part of the premium.
there are 3 main factors, and Frank may know this more precise pricing, but it's, you've got the liability, you've got the collision, and you've got this UIM. And this is probably the cheaper of the 3.
Do you represent Progressive?
Progressive is a member of APCI.
Okay. I'm generally curious about this change, but it feels to me like saying that is starting to move from a system that seeks out fault and makes that person pay a fair amount to the other person to a system where people want to be made whole quickly because people have sustained damage and injuries and they can't wait for litigation to occur for fault to be admitted or found. And, you know, if we're moving in that direction anyway, it seems like you would want policies that help make people whole, not fight about who owes what. So if Progressive is sort of leading us down the path to hell, like, I want to know that. But if all of these are going to start to become no one's admitting fault and you don't know who the uninsured driver is and you need to be made whole more quickly, then this sounds reasonable for the trend in the market.
I don't know that I could agree with the trend in the market.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sure Progressive is one of the biggest insurers in the country.
yes, they're a large auto writer.
Do you know of anyone else saying that that on their direct explicit advice on their insurance card, they're saying do not admit fault?
That's the first I've heard of that. I'm happy to.
In my committee room, I'll go get it.
I think that's what your lawyer would tell you if you get the chance to call him. We had a former senator who said, he told his clients, shut up and blow. You have to do the
Right. Yeah.
alcohol, and that's all you do.
It worries me to see an insurance company empowered to tell their large membership that you should not admit fault.
Okay, but I think that's different from this subject, and I've got 20 minutes
Okay.
to get this bill either in or out, because we have a half an hour with,
I guess I'm wondering, are you opposing this bill
Yes,
because you think it'll increase prices?
it'll absolutely add cost to the system. Can I speak quickly to the
Yep.
page one? And this is the revised definition of underinsurance. This surfaced early Tuesday morning, right before the vote in the Committee on Judiciary. So I shared with the Judiciary Committee, I shared this language with clients that hadn't heard yet about impact. Our read since then is that deleting the language, limits of liability and inserting whereof the damages, we read that to mean that no longer are you bound by the limits of the liability of the policy, but you will be liable for the damages that are sustained in the crash. And so, regardless of what your limits may say, if your damages exceed that, then the insurer will have to pay those
so
damages.
even if I had $28,000, I got 10 from them, we say, all right, you have to cover the other 10. I'm still 8,000 short. You think this language implies that even though I've only paid for 10, the insurance company has to pay for the extra 8
Correct.
to make, all right.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever heard that the purpose of insurance was to make people whole. It's to provide, I mean, you can make yourself whole if you pay enough to get the insurance to make you whole. But generally, I mean, there's a thing to replace my house, not what it cost me, but replacement value.
Right.
You are supposed to update that every couple of years right now. But if I don't pay for that, then I don't have that guarantee that I'm gonna be made whole and have a house. If my town hasn't reappraised in the last 15 years,
And so it's what it does, if we're interpreting this correctly, is sort of render, as I said, the liability limits immaterial. Secondarily, we have no idea what the damages may or may not be in the future, so there's a really hard way to try to predict what they may be and how to price a policy that would reflect that. So there could be some unintended consequences. I woke up thinking, well, why wouldn't I drop my limits to the very minimum, knowing that I'd be entitled to full damages? And just pay that portion of the premium that is.
I think we'll ask Maria if you can take a look at that and run it button. Let's come up. Maybe Senator Sears will give us another day.
I think, yeah, so I think the issue is when it refers to the liability insurance limits applicable at the time of the crash, whether that means the at-fault driver.
Yeah.
Which is how I interpret it. If it's not interpreted that way, you could,
Could we
Clarify
make it
that?
clearer
Yeah.
so it would be less?
Right.
onerous?
and then you have damages up to whatever your underinsurance policy limits are. That's how I read it, but
Yeah.
Okay, that's how I understood it, yeah, well, first. If they deduct the 10 I get from the at-fault driver from my 10, I can see where that might be an issue. But if I've got my 10, if it all comes out and there's 8,000 more, I don't see why anyone should think the insurance company was liable for 8,000 more than anybody's policy.
And again, it wasn't explained why this wasn't in the bills introduced, it wasn't, at least on the record, why this change was being made. It is, as I mentioned, an arcane and technical piece of law, but we've had it on the books for a long time, and we know what it is and how it operates, so we're very cautious about opening something up.
That's insurance companies are supposed to do. Maria, can you just check that wording and see if we can make it clear? And we can do that as an amendment. Sure. Okay,
And then just very briefly on the section 3 MedPay piece, this would not allow an insurance company to submit, in other words, seek payment from, in this case, an at-fault, or accept it as an at-fault party to offset the due pay. MedPay is an optional coverage as it's described, it's typically in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. It's a quick first dollar out for medical payments, monthly health insurance. What commonly happens in any variety of insurance settlement is that the parties get together and then talk about at fault and who's a portion who's responsible. MedPay up until this proposal would be subject to that same sort of negotiation and subrogation at the end. What I've heard from insurance companies that most of the MedPay claims are around $3,500 range. What this proposal would say is that the insurance company could not subrogate against the at-fault provider for that $3,500. But so then there would be again some double recovery, $3,500 plus.
so you've got this national mandate for $2,000. What you're saying is by doing this, we are limiting your ability to negotiate a settlement. Like, how,
An award settlement after the fact, right,
okay, so,
to sort of assign responsibility.
okay. So an award, you might be able to sue the at-fault driver to get an award to cover the medical costs
Yep.
of the other.
Yes,
Okay,
you can.
I will leave it to the proponents to explain why they
And
need
that's what
that.
third party means. The other party in the accident.
Right. Is this in the section 3? Yes.
Okay, sit in the corner.
People generally are not supposed to profit from getting an insurance settlement, right?
Right.
So this is only up to, probably not in, not even my experiences, it doesn't go all the way up and cover all the expenses. It's up to a percentage of the damage.
Right,
Right.
so yeah,
Okay.
up to your med pay
Up to the
limits in this
10,000.
case, yeah, typically
Okay,
$10,000, it's an option coverage, it's not really.
And now the guilty party, exhausts the available, to the victim.
In this case, med pay, this is your policy, so you're paying out, you're the one who's injured, you're going, getting the medical, your policy pays. If I'm hurt because of an act of somebody else, my insurer will typically go to that at-fault party and seek reimbursement from subrogation of what I've paid for medical coverage. So that, again, so that the responsible party has accountability.
I'm gonna
This would,
have to move this on.
Yep.
We've got, yes,
Madam Chair,
Val.
well, yeah, Chris canceled clients this afternoon, and I'm familiar with lots of them around often, but I would hope that he could.
Yes,
Be the
no,
proponent voice.
Mr. O'Brien, if you can stay on, if I've got a few more minutes, if you have something to add, we'll do that, but I want to get all the parts on the table. Because I'm not sure, and we do have a hard stop, because we are going to lose our council, and we have one bill that absolutely has to come out today. So,
Thank you, and I'll have that in mind and be as brief as I can, and one of the ways is to try to get to the question that Senator McDonald asked is what problem are we trying to solve? I'm Chris Manley, I'm an attorney in Burlington, Vermont.
okay,
I represent injured folks, and I've been dealing with unfinished cases for a very, very long time. The problem that we have in Vermont is there isn't enough access to insurance money for injured people. The limits of liability in Vermont mandatory are $25,000. They've been that since 1996. The limits for underinsured mandatory are $50,000. They've been that way since 1996. You can think about what the cost of healthcare has been since 1996. We've more than doubled. And so initially, when we were before Senate Judiciary, we're saying, let's double the limits. Let's make the UIM coverage $100,000. And we backed away from that in response to industry saying that premiums are gonna increase, go up. So we try to find the cheapest way to get more money into injured Vermonters in terms of premium dollars. Like where's the rub gonna be? And within the materials you have is a progressive, what we call declarations page. We're talking about less, like 5% of the overall premium for underinsured motorists, and we're talking about like a $3 swing per 6 months, so $6 per year. So the figures in Rhode Island that you were hearing, I asked you to focus on what happens in a Vermont policy if it goes from $50,000 to $100,000 UIM. It's a very small amount of money for working Vermonters to have to pay in terms of premiums. There's always the response from industry, we're gonna have to raise premiums. We're gonna have to raise premiums every time. Have they raised premiums since 1996? They're paying out less than half than they did in 1996 if you talk cost of living, and within your materials, there'll be an Art Wolf report. So what happens is clients come into my office, and the first thing I say to them is, you got hurt, but you got hurt by someone who's not in a commercial vehicle, you're gonna be out of luck, we're not gonna have enough money. We're talking about double recovery and increasing damages. Almost every conversation I have is there's not enough insurance for you to make you whole. That's the vast majority of times when I'm representing people. So I say, the at-fault driver probably has 25, maybe he has nothing. So the really important number for you is what do you have in underinsured motorists? So I asked my client to bring out their policy, and they don't even know what underinsured motorist coverage is. And they look at it and I say, oh, you see that where it says 50? They say, yeah, good, I have $50,000 in coverage. I say, no, you don't. You have 25. Because they're going to get credit for what the at-fault driver has. So your 50 on your piece of paper only equals 25. So all your examples were right about this idea of, it canceling out your coverage. So if, for example, the at-fault driver had $50,000 in coverage, okay, in liability coverage, and you have $50,000 in UIM coverage, you have no coverage. It's all canceled out, it's gone. So if you have a $300,000 claim, the only thing you can get is $50,000. So we're asking the industry to pay a little more. That's it. And it's on the margins. This is not a big push. These are rounding errors. We're not talking about increasing the liability limits. We're not talking about increasing the UIM limits. We are asking for a little bit of more exposure. And we're not asking for windfalls or people getting more money than they deserve or double recoveries. This is not, the UIM is never a double recovery. We're asking them to get a part of what they lost. Medical bills, lost wages, pain, suffering, loss of enjoyment, like the categories of harm. And all of these are negotiated settlements, talking about future harm. That's all put into a case, what a case is worth. And so now, most often I say, I'm sorry you're in Vermont and the law under auto crash liability is really rough for you. It's rough all across the country too. People have low limits. And also to put in context, we have an article submitted from a business journal that says Vermont has the lowest premiums in the country. And if you figure in cost of living, I think we're 5th. We're not Rhode Island, we're not gonna be Rhode Island, we're not driving the Rhode Island conditions. We're in Vermont, where there are very few cars, very few crashes. So that whatever exposure is there, we're asking industry to bear it and not injured Vermonters who I have to deal with, who are bearing it now. And guess what? The losses don't go away. They don't get covered by something else. They get covered by taxpayer dollars for safety net things like Medicaid, Social Security, disability, all the other ways that people have to be taken care of when a crash happens. So what questions do you have? We're not asking also for open-ended policies. That language was not saying we're increasing the amount of underinsured motorist coverage by the language. The language was modeled by other states that have said, we're not gonna do the deduction. We're just gonna have the underinsured motors be what it says it is on your policy.
What about the section on damages insured pursuant legally entitled recovery? The one with the medical payment.
Well, the medical payment subrogation, that is an exception to what is typical. Typically, insurance companies, health insurance companies have a right to subrogation. So in my case, I have to deal with Blue Cross all the time. I have to deal with Medicaid, Medicare. So they pay the bills in the first instance.
Right.
Liberty Mutual then pays the settlement. And out of the Liberty Mutual money, I have to turn back to Blue Cross and say, here's the amount of money, and negotiate that with them about what they'd be entitled to. So this is carving out a very small amount of money that the person who paid the premiums for would not have to pay back. It would be an exception that some states like New Hampshire said, this is a way in a smaller case where someone's, paid the premiums for $5,000 of health insurance that may go to, deductibles and co-pays before their health insurance sets in, that they don't have to then turn around and pay that back to Liberty Mutual, if that's the liability carrier. So does that make sense? Subrogation is a harder one to follow.
Yeah, especially when we're hitting this cold.
Yeah.
And I can't ever, and I've been in this room over 20 years, remember doing anything significant with auto insurance,
Yeah.
maybe aftermarket parts.
Yeah.
Which nobody knows. So, okay,
And that's usually a very, very small premium too in policies, and it's a very small amount of insurance, so it's usually 1,000 or 5,000. Occasionally, we see a $10,000 medical payment, but that's your own auto. So you're hurt, and instead of having to turn to anybody, you just can turn to your own insurance and say, I have a very high out-of-pocket limit on my health insurance.
so
This first $5,000 for my PT treatment for the next 6 months is gonna come from my auto.
okay. Committee questions.
Well, just curious, since you deal with this so much. As we look at auto insurance, maybe more now in the future. Does it continue to make sense to predicate it on the at-fault driver and the driver not at fault? Or will that start to change?
The label on your card is outrageous. It is basically telling somebody not to tell the truth.
I just been bound to it.
I'm an attorney, I don't tell my clients to say anything other than what is truthful.
Right.
So if you are saying deny when you are at fault, that is inappropriate, and we have an at-fault, we have a fault-based system for tort law in Vermont. It's not changing, it's built on hundreds of years of, the way we do business. So that card is not saying we're now going to a no-fault car crash system. It's just basically saying what Progressive wants you to do is hide from whatever responsibility you may have.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that they call their carrier and say, hey, I ran the red light. I didn't tell the other driver that. And then the carrier can then say to me, we've acknowledged responsibility here. We admit liability. Let's talk about harms. And that can happen, like happens in rear end car crashes, drunk driving car crashes. They, Allstate calls up and says, hey, we accept liability.
Yeah.
But, to have the insured put in that, I don't know.
I'm just wondering if we should be looking at bad actors in the insurance market who are. Could they penalize their own members for admitting fault at some?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I know that they're very Progressive and others are not particularly easy to deal with in my law.
You might, as a consumer, call them.
I
and
will.
ask questions. And I wanna get finished with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
I wanna
I'm
get
sorry.
Emily Brown up to get a non-contested. in this.
The exact language is, this is number one, what to do if you're in a car accident, remain at the scene, don't admit fault.
Okay. Senator,
Okay. I'm thinking maybe I can make more sense if I work from personal experience.
Okay.
But there was no medical involved in this, but a guy vacuumed to me, okay? My insurance company paid for everything. And I was, so why should you be doing it? I was worried about my premiums, said, I didn't do it, he said, no. What we're going after is,
That's a subrogation claim.
so we, okay,
Yeah.
so that's how it worked, and I got paid, so I was made whole. And then, I actually don't know what happened after that.
Yeah, but that was a property damage.
It was probably,
Yeah, that's different, but that does happen, yeah, you say to your own insurance company, I have this coverage. Pay it in the first instance and then we'll worry about, and then they say, we'll go chase it down from the other company later. But that's not the way it works in a personal injury case, we don't get a payment from the at fault or from your carrier initially, you can't even go after underinsured motorists until you get the underlying part exhausted, the liability part. If that makes sense, the at fault person, you can't make the claim until that has been ponied up. So it's a little different in the bodily injury.
and I don't think I reached the limit of my coverage.
Yeah.
All right, so there's nothing from that.
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna move us along. I
Okay.
wanna hear from Emily. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Emily,
Okay.
the non-contested.
Yeah. So Emily Brown, Department of Financial Regulation. So I thought I'd just do maybe a level set because I know that normally we're talking, or at least I'm talking to this committee about health insurance. And I think auto liability insurance is very different in how it acts. So when we're talking about health insurance, to your point, right? You expect that if you purchase health insurance, aside from your deductibles and co-pays, that your medical bills are gonna be paid, right? And that you won't be left holding the bag, when you are discharged from the hospital or go see the doctor.
I think we expect that less and less, but.
You totally, point taken. But what auto liability insurance is supposed to do is protect you from liability when you hit someone or someone sues you because you're in an accident. It's not supposed to necessarily pay you and make you whole when you're in an accident, right? So it's meant to respond to an incident when there is one. So an example is you hit someone, right? You're at fault. Your liability insurance is gonna respond to that, whether it's a lawsuit, whether it's paying the other person's, right, injuries for the other person's injuries. That's what the liability insurance is doing. It's not responding to your medical injuries, right? That's the med pay. That is sometimes, as was testified to, like $5,000 to $10,000. So when we're talking about the uninsured coverage, right, the purpose of it.
Can we just
Oh, yeah,
clarify,
sorry,
is
yeah.
it called underinsured coverage or both?
It's called, the statute says uninsured, underinsured, or unknown motorists. So
Okay,
It's,
it's because like
yeah.
everyone's underinsured, right? Like
Well,
pretty much.
Well, not
Okay.
necessarily per the statutory definition, right?
Okay,
So uninsured is an easy one, right?
Yeah.
That's someone who doesn't have any insurance.
right.
Underinsured is what the statute we're discussing, right? We're kind of
Okay.
adjusting that definition. That's a definition that triggers this statute, right? That determines when the underinsured insurance comes into play.
And the at-fault person does not have enough insurance to cover the cost.
Correct.
And that's when my insurance comes in.
Exactly.
Right.
But the purpose of it, and I wrote this down so I could try to be very concise. The purpose of the underinsured insurance that you carry is to put you in a position or a place you would have been had the other party had comparable coverage limits or similar coverage limits to what you have, right? So when you go and purchase your insurance coverage, you're making a decision. Do you want to carry the minimum, which is 25,000 and 50,000? Or do you want to carry 50,000 and 100,000? Or do you want to carry $1 million, right? That's your decision, okay? And what what that decision is really comprised of is how much, like, if I were to get sued today because I go and hit someone, what are my assets? Well, how much do I want to be covered for? That will then protect me if the insurance coverage that I buy is the caps hit, right? How much do I want to purchase to cover myself that I want the insurance company to respond with? Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so by having the underinsurance coverage, you're, and there are people out there, right? We're all required to have insurance in Vermont, right? We're required to have the liability insurance, that's in law. There are people who out there who don't have it. So in that instance, you want to be put in a position that you would have been in had that other person had your limits, okay? So if we change the law, right? You would essentially be put in a position where you would be put in a higher position than the limits you purchased would have responded with. So instead of it being, yep, I decided to purchase $25,000 of coverage, or I guess in the, not to get too technical, but the UIM statute requires a minimum of 50 and 100. So in this instance, in the world, in Vermont, right, everyone's supposed to have 50 and 100. So when that underinsurance responds, you are having either the 50,000 or whatever you decided to purchase. And in our statute, it says that the UIM coverage is supposed to match your liability limits that you have chosen, unless you decide not to do that.
Is that not in the bill?
That's not in the bill, that's an
Okay.
existing law, which is 94-1.
Okay, so right now, I choose to have 25,000 in uninsured driver insurance.
You can't choose that because the statutory minimum is
so
50, 100.
Okay, so I choose 50.
Yeah, correct.
And so the other driver, it's not his, the other driver has $50,000 in regular coverage, so I can get 50,000 from the other guy.
Exactly.
So I am now whole to where it is my auto insurance that takes over and is responsible for paying the difference, the damage to my car.
So we're not talking about damage, we're talking about liability, okay? So we're talking about the other person's at fault,
Yeah,
right? They don't have the 50 and 100, they have
nothing.
25 or whatever.
They have nothing.
They have, well, that's uninsured, that's
Yes, okay.
different, right? So they have to have some, in an uninsured situation, they have to have some insurance. It's just not it's not meeting the minimum, right? So essentially what happens is that you have this piece of your policy that's saying, you know what, we're gonna act like that other person had 50, and we're gonna make sure the difference is covered. So we're putting you in a position that if that person had been properly insured, you would have gotten 50, right? And then your insurance company's making up that difference
If
up
that
to the
person
limit.
had been properly insured, their insurance would have covered the damage to my car.
They would have covered, we're talking about liability, so they would have covered injuries to you up to their policy limits,
Yes.
right? Because let's say you have the same limits and they're completely 100% at fault.
Yeah.
You're not getting access to your policy, you're getting their policy, right? You're getting the 50,000, they're covering what they need to cover under Vermont law. You're only getting that 50,000, you're not able to then pop over into your insurance and get more money under your liability policy
So my
because.
car is totaled. I can,
So that's collision coverage and that's optional. And that
Okay.
collision coverage would respond to your damaged vehicle, right? That's
Okay.
different. We're just talking about liability coverage here and who is responsible for the damage.
okay.
Or for the bodily injury, I should say.
50,000.
Yep.
If we allow this to go through, then one party would have $100,000 worth of cut, because
Yeah.
I got 50
Exactly.
that person.
Yeah.
I now have $100,000.
Right, if your damages were 100,000 in that instance, you
Okay.
could double, you could stack those on top of each other. And have access to higher limits than you would have had this statute not been triggered necessarily.
I'm gonna have to shut this off because
That's-
Kirby's here and I got
Okay.
one bill.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask Senator Sears if we could hold on to this for another day. Because we have not done any of, collision liability.
It's
Mostly
very
because it
different.
nicely hasn't been an issue in
Right,
some
right,
parts of the market.
yes.
I mean, I would just say, I, from the testimony we received, I see the value in moving this bill forward. I'm not sort of convinced that the way things are now is working.
Yeah,
I did,
so-
now I don't.
Yeah, I'm just trying to tell you how
It works now.
And the purpose of how it's supposed to work, right? It's not supposed to, underinsured coverage is again, like I said,
Right.
just supposed to put you in the place of, had that other person had actual coverage. It's supposed to put you in that position.
Okay.
But it's
so
kind
now-
of like you're setting the value on your own
Yes,
life.
and
That if you
that's-
can't
well,
afford better insurance, that's the
And
value of your
that's,
life.
and unlike health insurance, right,
Yeah.
which there's tons of policy decisions that have been made around
Right.
that. Auto and PNC policies, generally, like, you are choosing your coverage, right?
Mhm.
So if you say, I don't wanna pay for a lot of insurance, I don't have a lot of assets. What are people gonna, get from me? You can choose to have lower limits,
Right.
right? But if you were like, you know what, I wanna protect my assets, you can then say, I wanna buy higher limits. And then that when you're going out into the world,
Yeah,
you're protected at that limit,
yeah.
right?
I don't wanna piss off the chair, but if you're buying both, right, you have to buy both. You have to buy, if you're at fault or if you're the victim, then both should kick in. You should be able to say,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm getting the money from the person at fault and I have coverage because that's not gonna cover it.
No, I
Let me
don't-
just throw in one thing though. What you're saying essentially,
Yeah,
if I understand it correctly, and I think I do, is that as far as this uninsured coverage, essentially consider the liability insurance of the other guy.
right,
That's his insurance policy.
Right.
It's not your insurance policy.
exactly, yeah,
You may want to have coverage for your bodily injury, but there's a separate set of coverages for bodily injury.
Right.
And you could buy that or choose not to buy that.
So would you get $50,000, which is the legal limit? You get that
or whatever you've chosen to
whatever,
purchase.
if you
Yeah.
chose to purchase $200,000, then you get the 200,000.
Right,
Okay,
As far as the person who hits you, who has this uninsured coverage, it gives you a minimum amount that you can act against. Now, if you're damaged or hurt more than, and you don't have bodily injury coverage in your policy, you're not buying liability insurance for what he does to you. You're buying liability insurance for what you do to someone else. And so you have the right to go and file suit against the guy who hit you. But I'm not at all certain that it's appropriate that you add that to his uninsured motorist coverage, because that's coverage the same as if you had the same coverage in the reverse applied. You're not insuring somebody else.
okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to start, we can go back to discussion if we don't run out of time today, depending on how late you would like to stay. But, yeah, I'm going, but we've got Kirby is here. We've got, come on up, Kirby. We've got to get 181 out of here. I believe the bill we were working on yesterday. This is draft 2.2. So
Same
is this
stuff.
the one we were working on yesterday or the one with some of the change?
Thing is that.
Do you wanna look at Brace with,
Oh,
do you wanna look at Brace
Oh.
before with me?
We don't have.
no, we got,
Another,
Oh, okay.
there comes,
That's,
I won't be put on the list for paper copies of.
okay. I like paper copies because you can't make notes on computer.
I can't keep track of my emails.
there is a way, but it's really complicated.
Okay, so vehicles.
the same link from yesterday, will it work?
All right.
That's 181.
Okay.
It's on the committee pages.
Oh, we'll see if I can get into the page. No, we can't load it. Keep going, this is just my iPad.
Grab 2.2, or we're going something.
2.2 is what the share
And
one.
we have a copy, so why don't you go over what we did yesterday and then Senator Chittenden can tell us the two suggestions you had. And we can decide if we want to do those, and I believe Kirby has drafted those up. So either way, we should be able to get this bill out of here.
Should be. The Zoom link? Yeah, hang on. There we go. We've got the ways. So, Kirby Keynote City Council. I'm joining the, chair asked me back for further discussion, but we don't have new language at the moment.
I'm not sure if you're looking for me to say something here.
No, I think we're gonna go over what we decided yesterday. And then you can tell us the suggestions, anybody can make suggestions for changes. And then we're gonna have to vote it out, we're gonna have to give some time to get it. If it's different from the two that came in, we're gonna have to have some few minutes for drafting time, and we have a hard stop in 20 minutes, so. We're here.
Yeah, I have to
okay?
be somewhere at 3 p.m.
And I think you can just do the changes.
Well, we don't have any changes from yesterday. There have been some questions about what this tax would apply to, what kinds of services. I've reviewed it again for concerns about whether mobile services or internet access would ever be subject to this. I think that all the pieces come together in a way which that's not an issue. The gross receipt definition does exclude both mobile service and internet access service, so those would never be included in gross receipts. And the only taxpayers that would be subject to this would be those that are selling streaming service to a customer.
Meaning the internet is not big tax.
No, it's very clear as it's written right now that will not happen. The Department of Taxes would not. Administer this in a way in which it tried to do that. It is narrowly written throughout that. It really is a provision of and the sale of streaming services to a customer, an end customer who's going to use it. The way that the definition of customer works is if it's a resale situation, then that would not go into the gross receipts. I said and I have no idea if this is how the business model is done, but if it's sold to an internet provider who then sells it to their customer, then for let's say it's Netflix, that's not going to be on Netflix's gross receipts because they are not selling it to an end customer. It's going to be on the provider or whoever that is selling it to the customer. So in that way, non-streaming, what you would think of is.
As we know, streaming today, if new models come up, we may even adjust the statute, but right now, streaming is pretty identical.
There's also the First Amendment question about the provision.
16 on page 4.
Right. So this, under no circumstances shall service provider subject the assessment. We've seen this, as in the first sentence here, the important part of it for me is as a pass-through to customers. That's not, from my reading of it, is not precluding a business from referencing the tax on a bill, any kind of advertising, anywhere. That the tax exists and that the business is subject to the tax and even that it affects the rates. This is written so that it specifically cannot be on a bill as a pass-through
as a set.
In other words, basically pretending as though it were like a sales tax that's imposed on the customer. As long as that's not happening, that's the only restriction that the language is making on speaking. And I would say that there's a test that's applied for commercial speech, the First Amendment, that federal courts use, and the first question in the test is, does it mislead customers? And if the speech is misleading to a customer, then it's not protected.
Okay.
And in my reading of it, that is exactly what this language is getting at. So I don't imagine that a scenario would come up in which speech wasn't misleading and therefore the test is applied and somehow this is decided or it's ruled that this violates the First Amendment. I don't think if the factual scenario would ever be one in which it gets past that first question. It would have to be misleading in order for the state to be precluding it. Department of Taxes could interpret it more broadly, stuff could happen where there's a set of facts that come up that where a problem happens, sure, that could happen. But if it's implemented as narrowly as it's written here, I don't think that scenario would come up where there would be a First Amendment problem.
Well, if you say that you can't put it on the bill as a pass-through, if you put it on the bill as saying price for streaming services, $10. Vermont state tax on pass-through services, $1. Total due $11. That doesn't say it's a pass-through, does it?
I would think if it's like a line item like that, I would think that could be considered a pass-through.
Well, the pass-through would suggest though that the state, I guess there's a definition of pass-through. And you can have different interpretations of pass-through. What you're saying is actual factual, that this is my charge and this is what the state is making, is taxing for that. And I'm not sure how that's in any way untrue.
Well, the state is not taxing the customer. The sales tax is listed separately because that's a tax on the customer.
Sure.
We are taxing the gross receipts. Companies don't put, this is your share of our income tax on.
But there's nothing that says they can't.
Well, I think,
So long as it's disclosed and it's not misleading as
well, I
such.
think that to imply that it is a tax on them is misleading, but
Well,
we can
again,
leave this
depending
all
upon the
out.
way they state it, if they state, Vermont state tax on streaming services charged to Comcast on that line and put in that amount, is that misleading?
I think we might
that
just
could be
want to
permissible.
delete this
You think that
section.
could be permissible?
I think that could be permissible under this language
Yeah.
too, as long as it says tax on Comcast.
I mean, and again, you could effectively do the same thing, I think.
I think this has continually caused discussion. It is not essential to this bill. I doubt that Disney is going to signal out the Vermont tax. It'll cost them more to print it on their form than they're paying. If the entire country does it, maybe, but I don't. It's just kind of a point of local pride, I think, that we don't want them passing it through. It's probably not worth fighting over this
So
section.
like, do not deny the liability
So
on an insurance form. I'm wondering why we want to regulate something like this.
I'm okay to let it go. I didn't want to head count it.
Can we get a head count? Do we want to let this go?
I don't know, we don't want to hide taxes. They can tell people.
Exactly, I think they could say,
It's not.
it is a tax that Vermont is charging, and it affects them. If the supplier wants to put and notify them of the fact that 15 cents of this is going to Vermont, I don't see why they can't do that.
It'll be a lot less than 15.
Why do we want to hide it?
Okay. Senator McCormick,
I'm the nice one.
yeah. Sometimes.
Usually, come on, I try.
You-
I was thinking before that this is a distinction without a difference. Because you know darn well the company's gonna pass the tax on, so we're taxing the customer.
Of course,
Indirectly, but there is a difference between the company compensating itself for the cost of doing business and using that as part of the price. And on the other hand, acting as a tax collector, like with a sales tax. I mean, in the end, the customer is still paying it,
Yeah.
but no one is so naive as to think that, I mean, we all know the people we do business with get taxed, and we all know they include that as the cost of doing business.
I'm looking at the clock. We have
Okay.
10 minutes.
I'm just concerned that we don't do something that basically is deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it look as if we're hiding a tax that we're imposing on people, and that's what this does. We're hiding
I
it.
missed that we strike that language.
Well, okay. All those in favor say aye.
I hope we
Say
clear about
no.
language.
I think I heard that as 601. Okay. Senator, we have one other proposed amendment.
I'll just say from the outset, I'm fine with the bill as is. I heard reasonable arguments yesterday and asking for greater clarity between the two. Would it be okay for?
Well, we have another version drafted, right, that has this one other change in it. And so it would be easier on the drafter in our time frame if no one has objections. So just tell us what you want to do.
Okay, so the language that would then do is just make clear that the video streaming service provider or television streaming provider means a person who transmits, broadcasts, or otherwise provides. I could read the whole thing, or we could bring it up. It's just greater clarity as to what the distinction between providing internet services and providing streaming services. And it does reference a 47 United States Code, section 23.
Does this say that there's an absolute exclusion for internet providers in the event that they decide to start streaming videos?
That is the question I posed to Kirk.
This language changes the definition for video streaming service to expressly exclude basically, well, cable service was already there and is adding internet access service, which would be a charge for accessing the internet or a charge for accessing the internet through a mobile service. So the other language that exists would prevent those things from ever being taxed anyway. But this is extra belt and suspender. is
Are we
what
sure
this
it's
would
belt
be.
and suspenders? I guess I'm concerned at last minute and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It looks a little too much more than belt and suspenders to me.
I think it's belt and suspender.
Okay,
You know, I didn't take this directly from lobbyists or anything. I wrote this and it lines up with the other.
Do they care one way or another that this is in here? Did this give them extra reassurance that we're not
Extra
hacking the internet?
reassurance Despite everything you said.
Without even speaking for them, I would expect this to be extra reassurance, belt and suspenders. But there's also the avenue in the house. So if we don't want to put this language, let's move it on out. And I could go either way.
I mean, right now, I'm looking at 9 minutes. We've got two choices. They're belt and suspenders. They're both drafted. We can leave both of these changes out. I think with all the discord, I feel more comfortable taking out the prohibition on telling lies to your customers. And you know, if this one is belt and suspenders, I think we've done everything we can. If we don't do this, PEG and the general fund will not get this revenue.
I just think the world is changing quickly, and while this might be belt and suspenders now, I don't think that's guaranteed into the future. I just don't feel comfortable with it. So that's my vote right now. If the majority wants it.
Well, how quickly can you,
We voted in a draft with just removing that one sentence we were talking about previously. Can I make a motion?
So then
The one on,
Is this in here or not?
So this one has the other change that I don't think we're comfortable with yet. So there is not currently a draft where it just removes that sentence that we were previously talking about.
I would suggest that if you wanted to vote right now, you could vote on draft 2.2. This is 3.1.
Okay.
You could vote on 2.2,
Striking.
but with striking and readjusting the section numbers.
we could, 2.2 takes out the,
It would be 2.2, but striking.
Page 4.
Subsections, well, yeah, I don't know, you're the experts, not me, on how you want to, identify
Okay, I
what's
think
being
what I
struck, but
need
it's
is
page 4
an
subsections.
amendment
Strike in
to
the hand.
strike whatever page that is, I think we've got 2.2 up here. If my computer wants to access it.
Which is the one with the paper copy.
Is it that?
Yeah,
key?
the one we have
So
to
the
pay
paper
for.
part is up to the
Yeah.
state and providers shall not communicate to a customer the tax imposed on
Yes.
the customer?
Yeah, it's all, the entire subsection C, so you have that and
What
both above
you've
it.
got,
Yeah, under no circumstances.
Someone will
Include the amount of the assessment of the bills passing the customer. So the least subsection C.
The entire thing is what they're saying.
okay, what
That's
I
fine.
need is a motion to strike section C. Under 10.603 in possession and collection, that takes out the whole thing about what you can put on your bill.
Don't move, Madam Chair.
In draft 2.2.
In draft 2.2. Which is the one we've been working on.
It's the strike all amendment.
Okay, we need that, motion.
I think
I did. Senator McDonald moved to strike.
Oh,
section
you
C.
moved it. Okay, Senator McDonald has moved to strike section C. In 10.603 in possession and collection, it's on page 4 of draft 2.2. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Is this all done now?
PowerPoint, all those opposed, say no. I see that we have struck that section, and I see that as 601.
now we move.
Okay. So with, you have a motion.
I now move the bill favorably with amendment. Is that how we do it?
Right,
As amended.
draft 2.2 as amended.
Okay, Senator Chittenden has moved that we vote, we approve, yeah. We report, yes, S-181 as amended to the Senate. Okay, further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Thank you, committee. Who would like to report this?
Happy to.
He likes it.
He pointed at me, but.
No, you seem so enthusiastic.
We have so many people that are unenthusiastic. Okay, Kirby, can you get that struck and printed? They haven't shown up. No, they haven't shown up yet to see if we've got anything else. But that one does need to go up.
Send it to the chair and Zane and Senator Chitman.
Yeah, just, we just need a copy, so send it to Zane, he can print it. And we need a copy to take upstairs. Okay? We made it, almost, under the wire. We do have 2 other agenda items today. S-254, this is the rechargeable battery containing products. We had the presentation yesterday. Just wanted to find out if we need, if you need to hear from anybody else on that. I think that our position is the possibility that a few more people may need a licensed stewardship program at $15,000, so, but others may be able to combine it and maybe we'll lose a little. That's our section. Do we need to hear from anybody else? Are we ready to vote it out? You are moving to approve S-254?
Yes, as before us, recommending this passage by the Senate.
Okay. So Senator
backers.
Senator McCormick, the good one, has moved that.
Nice. The nice.
Has moved that we report, S-254 and Article 80 to including rechargeable. Oh, that was such good timing because We have a motion to approve S 254, relating to batteries and rechargeable batteries and battery containing products under the state battery stewardship program. Motion is to approve. Any further discussion?
That's only if we add an amendment to increase the size of brake sheds to store all the stuff that we're required to keep.
I haven't gotten over gallon milk cartons yet.
This is gonna make it an economic development, though, I like it.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, say no. I am calling that 700, and Senator Bray, you will report.
Lovely, thank you. I was hoping you would say that, honestly.
Your arrival's well timed. S 301 again is miscellaneous agricultural subjects. We've had Vita in, I think we're all set with that bill, there's the business things. I did hear today in the hall from the lobbyists that they are working mostly with the rep Bobby.
Barless Rubio.
Barless, that's the one, I keep getting police, it's Barless Rubio. And they are talking about fines and, some kind of penalty if they don't do what we require them to do.
So the Rite Aid piece would need to go in the ag bill.
It would be an attachment to the ag bill. We don't have to have that out, so I'm gonna just let it sit here and give them some time to do Rygate. I suppose they can try and do it in the house, but they're gonna have to come up with some kind of an accountability program, the least of which is paying your people with some degree of certainty, so. I don't know, they were talking 10 days after the, and I'm saying, well,
More than standard.
yeah, they said they've got contracts.
Oh,
10 days after the contract, I said, well, if the contract is for 30 days,
Right.
That's different than if it's for 3 days.
Or if there's 3 days left on a contract and they haven't.
So they're working on it
Yeah, okay.
with the rep who represents Rygate, so.
Okay.
I will keep you posted. If they don't get something to us that we can live with by next week, we will vote that the ag bill out. Monday, Tuesday, I don't like thinking it's Monday, we're here. We've got the flood relief program bill that's come here with more flood preparedness. It's how we are better prepared for the next one. I don't know what anybody wants to do with that insurance bill. It is changing what is the national, no, it's not the national, they said Rhode Island and some other states have done that. Had allowed the double dipping. That I get the 50,000 from him. I don't get another 50,000 from that portion of my insurance policy to cover my 100,000 in damage. I assume my collision or some other portion of my policy would kick in.
It wouldn't. Another portion of your policy wouldn't kick in.
If I get hit by someone, he's uninsured. I have 50,000 uninsured drivers. I'm paying for that. I could get a 200.
Yes, right.
I have 100,000 in damage. Wouldn't my policy cover the rest of the damage to my
It
vehicle?
would be up to your policy limits.
Okay, up to my policy. Yes, I choose to buy
You talked about liability or damage.
liability.
Right. There's two different, so there's collision too, which, and again, I'm not an expert in P&C insurance, but there's the liability, I think. It was said earlier, there's the collision, which is optional, right? You can purchase that. And there's the med pay. So those are the three different parts. So if you got hit by an uninsured driver, it would completely be on your policy. And like I said, usually in our law, the uninsured limits have to match your policy, your liability limits. Unless you with a signature waive that. So what would happen is your policy would respond under that underinsured motorist provision.
Right.
But you wouldn't be able to jump over into another pot of money for your liability coverage. Does that make sense?
So if I get $100,000 worth of damage, it's an uninsured driver, then all I'm insured for is the 100,000.
Is whatever limit that is in your policy.
If you have 50,000.
And I have
you're insured at
50,000, which is what
Yeah.
is the minimum.
Is the minimum.
And the risk I'm taking is if I get hit by an uninsured driver, all I have is 50,000.
It's 50.
This would say, well, no, what would happen if it's an
Yeah,
so they're
this is-
talking
we're just talking about
underinsured.
underinsured, right? We're talking about when there's some money, but it's
They
less
uninsured
than,
driver.
exactly, yeah.
They have 50,000.
Yeah.
They pay it to me. What I'm insuring myself with is that I won't get hit. I would get $50,000 if I am hit by an uninsured driver.
But if you're an underinsured victim and a wealthy person hits you, that doesn't guarantee that you're getting their maximum coverage. It guarantees you're getting your own, which would be much lower.
No, you would be getting, if you had a really wealthy person and had very high limits,
Mhm.
you'd be getting the max of their.
Of theirs.
Policy, yep. And that's how the auto insurance works. It's all, that's why we require everyone to have it, because you want other person, right? Because think about it this way, that means their premium's gonna go up, right?
Mhm.
When, if they're at fault, right, and they have really high limits, you get their max limits, and then they then have the repercussions of that accident on them.
Do you have actuarial information about how much? Can you get that for next week? How much it would increase?
Impact.
Yes.
That's the thing, we have no clue
Okay.
how much this would impact premiums. It's probably going to impact them, right, because you're adding a cost.
You're adding-
But I can't speak to at all what that looks like in Vermont. We
Sure,
don't have.
basically will have to tell us if we don't have the information.
Yeah, if we were to figure that number out, that would be a study. And I don't even like saying that
Yeah,
word.
No, they were looking at Rhode Island and said
Right.
180% increase in one section of the bill.
Yeah.
We're not Rhode Island.
Right.
I have the feeling this will have minimal impact if we do it. It does change the standard that insurance is issued under. Whether or not it's fair. Is it fair that somebody gets to not pay their insurance and hit me? And I only get whatever I've got in uninsured. And nobody gets made whole, I don't think. Especially with a very high end policy. So I don't know.
Theoretically, what you could do, you could raise the limit, or raise the floor rather on uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, but then that affects cost to everybody.
Right.
And
I
don't
think
know if
this
that's
is
something that we want to do.
a less impact to achieve
But
this.
it seems to me, again, at least the way I look at this, I look at that uninsured motorist policy is essentially you are buying the insurance coverage for that other guy who hits you and doesn't have enough insurance.
But exactly what we're doing is
Yeah.
changing what we mean by underinsured, because if you have far more unmet need,
Mhm.
then you have become underinsured by both what your policy offers you and by what the other person's policy offers you.
Right.
And I think that is the problem we're trying to solve. I haven't been in an accident as the victim where I have thousands and thousands of dollars in bills. But if I did, I would think that I had my coverage for someone else hitting me and my coverage, for
Well, you would
damage
have
to
your
my health.
bodily injury coverage, which you buy yourself. It would be typically the difference.
Yeah.
And when you buy insurance, you buy liability, you may buy bodily injury in case you're involved in an accident, you may buy uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, but they're three separate coverages.
Do we have any data, like at all, about underinsurance or who cares what levels of liability?
The percent of underinsured
Yeah.
or I think we have uninsured.
Okay.
I don't know if we have underinsured.
Okay.
Cause technically if you're buying insurance in Vermont, right?
Yeah.
you should be buying a policy that's in compliance with our laws. I think maybe an uninsured right, you can't force people to buy insurance. Underinsured, I'm just, this is, just spitballing, but that might be people from other states, that might be.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't know how.
Massachusetts, they didn't have auto insurance in Rhode Island, and a lot of Rhode Islanders came up through my hometown to work at the GE plant. And you did not want to get hit by somebody from Rhode Island, that's why they went to no fault. Because they didn't have auto insurance and they hit people.
And again,
Yeah,
Are we seeking to change what the judiciary voted
well,
out?
that's judiciary
Or not.
voted. That's, well, I have asked to let us take a look at this and see if we think what judiciary has voted will have an impact or is not something that we should do, is insurance. I'm sure with the liability, the attorneys, they would like this because it will get their customers, their clients, more money.
And we'll make the decision on those things when we come back next week.
If Senator Sears gives me another day to.
Should we have, if
We're
so,
not
should we have the
doing it today.
reporter of the bill? Maybe, like, should we hear why how they got 5-0?
Okay, yeah, so,
I'm not seeking to answer that question
Yeah.
today.
right, I just need to know
What
if we have an opinion, if we are still seeking, information. My hunch is that it won't have a major impact on premiums in this state. Just because we're so small and we do require insurance and you can cancel it the day after and people have been known to do that, but you have to have it to get an inspection. We have this problem as much as we can do. So this, if we do this, it would be a change. And other states, at least Rhode Island, have done it in the basic premise of insurance. That is, you buy your insurance, you buy $50,000, and that's the minimum of insurance in case you were hit by an uninsured driver. So if you get hit, what I think they're talking about is you get hit by an underinsured driver. The only thing you get from them is $10,000. Or what, from their other uninsured, but they pay you. And the present system is that 10,000 comes off your $50,000. Because that's what you were insuring yourself against from being hit by this underinsured driver. The bill is saying, no, you have $50,000 of your own, no matter how much you receive from the other driver. So I assume you could get $100,000 from the other driver and still get that. It is a change in how these policies have been calculated. I'm sure that the attorneys for the drivers would like it because it would give especially lower income drivers more money, but it will have some impact on rates. And we probably won't know how much until we've had a couple of those accidents, so we could think about it. I will ask Senator Steers, if either he or the reporter, probably the reporter of the bill, can come down, talk to us. I doubt that he's still in the building. I'm back to Bennington.
Right.
So I will contact him before Tuesday and just let him know we are getting into the insurance policy needs. And if DFR can find any more information, anything that will help us, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, because I understand that DFR was not invited to talk.
Nope.
We
did not testify.
Okay, so. We heard, so we've now got the kind of. No, but yeah, they don't have I don't have any stake in this game, they just tell me what it is. Okay, I think that's it. We've got a pretty light crossover week, but I don't know if they've got it out or not, but there are several education bills headed this way. And if they aren't, we'll have to create some and stick them on miscellaneous tax, but I know they've got several they're hoping to get over. Senator Gray.
So that I don't have a headache over the weekend, let me just check the basic understanding of the current Christmas proposal. The proposal is if you have $50,000 of uninsured motorist insurance, no matter how much they have or don't have, you're gonna get your amount.
That's your cap.
That to your cap.
Yes. You get hit by 100, and you, if you've got
No
100,000,
deduction for the value of the other. items
the other
in the
policy. That is not the present practice. It sounds like at least one, I'm sure more than one state has changed that. But it will, if you're guaranteed 100,000 rather than 50,000, it will be reflected on the price of your policy.
The other thing, the business is, we voted out, S 305 today, a miscellaneous PUC zone. And so I'd like to show it to you and just get clarity on whether you'd like to be routed with.
Is that utility regulation in it?
Yeah.
It probably should come here.
Yeah, so I think, so,
Okay, so our next week has become less.
well, less empty, and we also have to talk about matters before the PUC. So if we were to try to conclude business on that area, we would have a germane business.
We have one, two. Maybe one.
Got one that Senator Gray has.
And Senator Gray has one, okay. And then, so you guys can hear that. We are off, we are adjourned.
And I did Zane and Tom Lozon and the.
I got a few more hours.
All to say that.
I've never heard.
You-
this.
I know.
It might just be a lot.
Same.
You